Okay. So as far as the sort of 3D bar graph goes, what we can do, I'm just going to create a new document here, and you can make it any size you like. I'll just keep it a square. 1170 by 1170 is what I've just got going on here. I could make it bigger. I don't know. I'll give you, I think, 3,000 pixels by 3,000 pixels. Okay, at any rate, so the bar graph tool is where it's the same place as the pie chart tool. Let me get my magnifier out here. So it's down this way by the, spray paint, I guess this is. I'm not really sure what this is. And then the artboard tools right there. Just click on that, and you can create your little bar graph by just clicking and dragging, and you can determine what size of a bar graph it's going to be, like so, and then you get your first bar, right? And so you can add in your data. Now, unlike the pie chart, it didn't necessarily matter what order you put the numbers in terms of like magnitude, because with the pie chart, it's all about trying to compare parts to a bigger whole. So if they go in order of like greatest part to smallest part, like in a clockwise manner, that just like makes sense sort of graphically. But if in a bar graph, obviously it doesn't necessarily need to go in any particular order. You can just have them go up and down and whatnot, and it's just the size is comparison. The other thing you want to make sure you do is you have a good scale. So for instance, if everything, if like you have it measured in like millions, and you have like 100 million to to 120 million, obviously the difference is going to be huge. But if you have like 100 to 120, the difference might be a little bit bigger. So see if you can't simplify your numbers as best you can, right? So for instance, when I had that one thing before, I had 100 million, I had 80 million also. So all I really entered in was like 100, and then press tab, 80, and then maybe 70, and then maybe 5, and then maybe 20, and then maybe 80 again, right? Or maybe even like 75 or 50, who knows? Doesn't matter, right? So obviously you'll fill this in with your data points. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'll just have 5. All right, we'll just keep 5 for now. And just press the apply button, and then you've got this little thing pops up here. And it has your scale, has your biggest number, and then it has the number of bars you've got here as far as the different data points go. All right, so this you can just keep this open for as long as you like until you're ready to move on with like the actual designing it. So I'm going to go ahead and click this off, and in this particular instance, this isn't really necessary for me to, be super accurate here. But obviously, when you want to do this, you actually want to make this accurate. So with this bar chart here, bar graph here, I can just go back to what we did before, go to Object, and then Ungroup, and then it'll tell me that, hey, if once you ungroup this, you won't be able to affect the data anymore. And if you're okay with that, go ahead, press Fine, and then you can kind of separate your line from your bars. And then for the bars here, I'm just going to rotate these, right-click, transform, rotate, and I'll rotate these 90 degrees. Maybe in this case, negative 90 degrees, because I want the, yeah, okay. And I'll press OK. So I've got this right here, and then I can set up my my labels here. So first off, I'll just go to properties, and I'll just make everything the same color. So maybe I'll just make them all sort of a gray color here. And then one by one, I'll put in like the data that I had before. So in this case, make sure I remember this correctly. I had 100 million to begin with, or you can put 100 billion or whatever it is you want to do. So just type in what you got and then resize it to where it fits well. And please, please, please change the font from something other than Myriad Pro. Don't keep the first thing you see. Keep something different, right? So I'll change this to Caviar Dreams or something clean looking. That's fine, right? And then I'll just resize it so it'll fit. And I'll just resize this. With my direct select tool, I can select both the bar and the text and make sure they're centered with each other. So if I ever get this right here, have that be the key object, and then center that. And then with my move tool here, my selection tool, holding down Alt, I'll just sort of drag this down and make sure this is in the same spot. They're all lined up. Yeah, I might just pull this off to the side here, just because I don't want it half on, half off. Okay, so with this right here, I'll change the text. I'll just select all the text here, and I'll go to, well, first off, let me just change the text here. So this was what, 80 million. This was I think 70 million maybe. This was 10 million, and this was like 50, no, maybe 40, 20, not sure, I forget. But anyways, just label them in the way that you had them labeled. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to, first off, I'll just change these guys to the color that the rest of the graph was here. So let me just get my, so they'll be the same color as everything else. Make sure my stroke is off. And then these guys here, oops. These texts up here, I'm going to go to type and then create outlines. And then what I'll do is I'll just select these top little bars with the text. Make sure I select everything. And then over here in my Pathfinder, if you don't see Pathfinder, you can go to Window, Pathfinder, and then it'll say crop, or click to minus front. And that will, let's think here. First off, let me ungroup this object, ungroup. Let's see here. Can I Pathfinder minus front? There we go. So it punches out the letters. I do the same thing here. Minus front. Minus front. And I want to say these all have a stroke applied to them. Let me get rid of my strokes. I don't want any stroke on this. So no stroke on anything. All right, so these, and then at this point, I can just group all this together, and so that'll have its own sort of shape. Now, if I wanted to make this sort of lay down, kind of on its side, I could do the effect and use the 3D shape to extrude and bevel and just sort of turn it on its side. But I think an easier way of doing it would just be the way we did it when we were doing our isometric things, is just to click on shear and then sort of shear it. I want to say it was negative 30 degrees. And then rotate it 30 degrees. Or was it negative 30 degrees? All right, now it's laying down here. It's not quite what I want, maybe 62, maybe it's negative 60 degrees. Here we go. Okay, so let's back this up. All right, so just to be a little more exact about that. So basically, with this thing grouped together, I went to transform shear, and I sheared it negative 30 degrees on its vertical axis here. So make sure it's set to vertical, and the shear angle is 30 degrees. And then I right-clicked on it, went to transform, rotate. And then I rotated it negative 60 degrees. That now we have this sort of isometric view of our bar graph here. And with that done, what we can do is we can then add in our different data points. Like for instance, this right here, I invented this being like the value of our trade with the top 5 trading partners here that we've got in Georgia. We start off pretty strong with Canada, then we go to Mexico. So what I ended up doing is I just typed out, let's think here, Canada, and I'll make this one a little bit easier. In fact, before I do any of this, let me just go ahead and create a new layer and make my background color. So I'll go here to my rectangle tool and just put in any background color that you want. Something that maybe helps you see maybe something a little bit darker because you have this light gray. But then again, you can change the color of this sort of whatever you want here. So I'll fill this up, and I'll affect the saturation and brightness a little bit just to make it a little more like a background color and less like a thing that you want to be noticed. So all right, so up here, I might even make this little bar graph here, everything here, pull the opacity down a little bit just so it's a little less so it kind of all kind of comes together. So looks good. And then with this, what I can do is I can change this to white and bring a little more attention to these guys here. And so what we'll do is we'll just right-click on this, we'll transform it, we'll shear it, and we'll shear it negative 30 degrees. And what's awesome about this is that even though we've already sheared it, we can resize it, and we can still affect the type later on. So I'll just bring this down to size here, to where it's big enough to fit next to it. This might become a little bit smaller, and if that's the case, I could always maybe, for instance, put in like a an extra line there, Canada. So depending on readability, that might be a little less readable than you want. But there we go. This will probably be good. All right, Canada. And then I can just alt drag this back a little bit and line it up with the other bar graphs here, the other bars. And we can then just double click on these and change their names. So for instance, this is going to be Japan. This is going to be Sri Lanka. This will be China. And this will be Mexico. And so then you can sort of line these up. And so you have these things sort of standing up at the base. And it's like any other bar graph. You've got your your labels as far as the fields go, and then you have your values expressed in these bars. But it's just graphically a little more interesting. And then on the side here, I'll just I'll take my text tool and I'll type up something over here. And I'll say top exporting partners for Georgia 20. Whatever this is that you're working with here, and I'll just center this, and maybe even affect the tracking just to make sure it looks nice here. So line up everything like this. And then do the same thing we did before. We just take this whole object here. I'll turn it all white. Maybe even make it bold if I have the ability. Yeah, there we go, bold. And then I'll just go to Object, Transform, Shear. Instead of shearing at -30 degrees, I'll just shear at 30 degrees. And that way it's sort of standing up here. So it sort of stands up nice like that. Okay. And I'll shrink this down a little bit. And I'll just move that off to the side, and I'll shrink all this down a little bit to fit it all inside. And there we go. All right, we got this fun little thing. Now, I would say an extra sort of bonus might be to, for instance, like add some shadows sort of trailing behind. So if you wanted to say, for instance, duplicate this. Let me get in close here. Like duplicate Japan, alt drag it, and then transform it by, let's think here. I want to say if we were to rotate it or shear it, maybe something like negative. So for instance, like 2 degrees, something like that. Maybe not. What if we just rotated this? I'll tell you what, we'll leave shadows for a different day. But essentially, all we've got kind of going on here is just the idea that you can take your bar graph and you can just give it a little extra graphical flair just by doing a couple quick shears and repositioning and stuff. All right, so once again, we'll want to make sure that we put our reference down towards the bottom where we got our effects. So just www.topworldexporters.com was where I got this, and then I can put the rest of the stuff. This is not necessarily a good source. I think we'll have a whole we'll talk a little bit more about what good sources might entail, and we'll talk about how we can best best use the information that we're using, because we want to make sure that we're putting the right kind of information in the right kind of graph. All right, very cool. Can't wait to see you guys produce.